Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Cuban Assassin Podcast. I'm your host, Richie Acevedo, also known as the Cuban Assassin. Now, last time on the Cuban Assassin Podcast, I was talking about wrestling down at the World Wrestling Council in Puerto Rico, and where they started stiffing me on my pay, and they still owe me $900 to this very day, and where the WWF had bought out the WCW. I came back home. And when I came back home, I would end up marrying the love of my life, April Fitzwater, which would now be April Acevedo. And while I was back with my wife and my newborn son, Quentin, I was still driving taxi for a city cab because they worked around my wrestling schedule. And at this time, I would return back to wrestle for Scotty Ace's Nationwide Championship Wrestling, NCW Rampage, and his TV program. And he would have me do two programs with two different wrestlers. One was Killer Kurt.
All right, fans, in the ring, special presentation. Killer Kurt becoming an American citizen. Commissioner Stephen Taylor is in the ring. He has brought an INS representative signing the papers to make Killer Kurt an American citizen. Boy, Kurt has gone through so many changes in the past. Of course, a member of the Axis Powers, but now a fan favorite here.
Appreciate it. Everybody stand, remove their caps, and let's say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States.
Oh, the Cuban Commando! The Cuban Commando is attacking. Since January, and he's come back to attack his former partner. A couple of headshots right to the table, and the Cuban Commando is working over the new American citizen, Killer Kurt. The Cuban is going to the outside now. Unbelievable. A return of the Cuban Commando. He's coming off on that table, and Killer Kurt diving off. Lands the table, busted. Good God! The Cuban Commando laying out Killer Kurt. I don't believe this. The Commando has been gone since January. I don't believe this. Attacking Killer Kurt on a very special day here in here on NCW Rampage. We're seeing sexy Shane Steele, a return for Shane Steele back to the ring, taking on the Cuban Commando out of Havana, Cuba. And we saw a couple of weeks ago, Rock, in fact, it was just last week, what the Cuban Commando did to Killer Kurt.
Well, he rained on his parade. You know, the guy turns into a U.S. citizen, and this guy has to attack him from behind. But, you know, Killer Kurt don't run from anybody. He would have took the guy on one-on-one, but he had to do it from behind.
And here the Cuban choking Shane Steele with his own shirt. And Billy Biggs quickly in to break that one up.
The Fidel Castro wannabe, you know.
And the Cuban working over Shane Steele quickly. Again, this is our first chance to see Shane Steele since back in January, I believe, as well as the Cuban Commando.
Is he any relation to you?
No, no relation at all. You're talking about the Cuban.
No, I thought you were talking about Steele.
That's what I was talking about. The Cuban Commando with the advantage here now on Shane Steele. Fans, great lineup here for you tonight. Of course, we just saw Eddie Browning, one half of the former tag team champions, something else. A couple of big open-handed chops by the Cuban Commando. And Johnny Noble not getting along now since what we saw a couple of weeks ago for the tag team title where Eddie turned on Johnny.
John and Eddie are no more. It's like a divorce, you know. It's a sad thing. That's heartbreaking for a lot of people that's been watching these two guys come up through the ranks.
We got the Mid-American champion, Southern Shooter Todd Morton in action, taking on handsome Bo James a little bit later here on NCW Rampage.
That's going to be a classic matchup right there.
We heard Bo James make the challenge last week, and we'll see the title match here tonight. So the Cuban now with a couple of words for the fans on the outside. Great crowd once again, as usual, here in Moorhead at the Carl Perkins Center. Cuban Commando shooting Shane Steele across and delivers the back elbow.
Cuban's been in control of this whole match here. I mean, he's just totally dominated the man.
And what a way to come back for the Cuban Commando, coming back with a bang. as last week we saw Killer Kurt being an American citizen, or signing the papers to become an American citizen. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, the Cuban Commando attacks him from behind. And, of course, they've got a long history together as far as tag teams are concerned. They formed the Axis Powers. But I guess the Cuban Commando kind of left back in January on bad terms with his partner, Killer Kurt, finding the American way, and the Cuban not liking that. Here, the Cuban missing a couple of maneuvers. The back elbow missed and delivers the knee right to the midsection of Shane Steele.
Well, I understand the Cuban Commando took a big tour of Puerto Rico where he's very successful. He's a very arrogant man. He comes back, his partner's different what he used to be. You know, he lost it. But the thing I don't understand is attacking him from behind.
Well, you know how those Cubans are.
It's a devastating backdrop.
The Cuban Commando, again, in control over Shane Steele. I guess maybe trying to send a message here. Here's going with a slingshot suplex. Nice maneuver by the Cuban Commando. He hooks the leg. He's got 2 and 3. That's it. The Cuban Commando with a slingshot suplex, and now dumping Shane Steele to the outside.
Here we go.
Big win for the Cuban Commando in our opening match here on Rampage. Fans, we'll be back after this timeout, and we'll have more here on NCW Rampage.
And when I was home, I was driving taxi as well as wrestling, but I would be enjoying my family life with my wife, April, and our son, Quentin. And I was just enjoying being a father and a husband. This was a big change in my life that I never thought I was going to have the opportunity to be a husband and a father. The program with Killer Kurt would continue for NCW.
Pounds from Havana, Cuba. Here is the Cuban Commando.
Fans, here we go with your main event on NCW Rampage. In the ring now, the Cuban Commando, and this is one that he has been looking forward to, as well as Killer Kurt and many of the fans here in Moorhead, Kentucky. It'll be the Cuban Commando and Killer Kurt in your main event on Rampage.
His opponent from Berlin, Germany, weighing 282 pounds, here is Killer Kurt.
We heard from Killer Kurt right before the break, and here he comes, a man on a mission, right to the ring. He's still got that right hand bandaged up, still showing some effects of that burn, and he cannot wait to get his hands on the Cuban Commando, chasing him from the ring. What a great match this should be here on NCW Rampage, your main event tonight here on WB30. Cuban Commando goes to the outside as Killer Kurt just waiting for the opportunity to get his hands on the Cuban Commando. Of course, this feud is transpired over the last several months as we see Killer Kurt become an American citizen. That day was ruined by the Cuban Commando, who came back and put Killer Kurt through a table. The two have battled over the weeks, and we saw the Cuban Commando hit Killer Kurt with a fireball. It was intended right for the face of Killer Kurt, but Killer Kurt got his hand up there and deflected some of that, and instead suffered second and third degree burns on his hand. And it is his right hand, as we point out, and the Cuban Commando goes to the outside as the two were ready to lock up. Not sure what situation is there. I don't think that the Cuban is, it looks like he's not ready here. Killer Kurt just waiting as he has so far in this match. It's the anticipation here by Killer Kurt. He just wants to get his hands around the Cuban's neck. These guys were former partners, former members of the Axis Powers, and again, Kurt chasing after the Cuban, and the Cuban Commando goes to the floor, and Kurt is becoming frustrated right now. He said, come on, get in the ring. Now the Cuban Commando finally gets back in the ring, and we may get this one underway. You see the right hand bandaged up there by Killer Kurt. The severe burns, and look at the Cuban Commando ducking to the outside. Kurt trying to get the Cuban back in, grabs a handful of hair. Referee Gilbert Franklin in to break that up. And the Cuban says, hey, he pulled my hair. Gilbert Franklin asked Killer Kurt. He said, yeah, I pulled his hair. Now let's get back in here and wrestle. Killer Kurt and the Cuban Commando locking up. Here we go on your main event on NCW Rampage. Nice power by Killer Kurt to throw the Cuban back down to the mat, and the Cuban spills to the outside. And again, the Cuban accusing Killer Kurt of pulling hair. And this time Killer Kurt says no. So the Cuban, again, saying he pulled my hair, but obviously that's not the case. Killer Kurt and the Cuban Commando locking up in the center of the ring. Again, the power by Killer Kurt just throwing the Cuban down, and the Cuban again goes to the outside. And he's going to accuse him of pulling him. Yep, there it is. Pulling his hair again. No, I don't think that's the case at all. Killer Kurt just with a lot more power than the Cuban Commando. Cuban saying that the fans agree with him. I don't think you'll find that here, not in Moorhead, Kentucky. The two circle again and lock up in the center of the ring, collar and elbow. Now Killer Kurt locking in the side headlock on the big Cuban. And now look, the Cuban with a handful of hair shooting Killer Kurt into the opposite side. Nice shoulder tackle by Killer Kurt. Down goes the Cuban Commando. Here comes Killer Kurt. Off the ropes again. Trying for the high backdrop was the Cuban Commando, but that was reversed by Killer Kurt, who gets a hip toss of his own, converts that into an arm drag takeover, and down goes the Cuban Commando. Killer Kurt locking in deeply and tightly that arm bar as the Cuban gets back up to his feet and again goes to the ropes to try to break the hold, and that's exactly what's going to happen is Gilbert Franklin stepping in and breaking that one up again. Smart move by the Cuban to force the break, but obviously frustration setting in possibly on Killer Kurt. And now the Cuban with the advantage, and he's going right to work on that right hand of Killer Kurt. He sees the opportunity there to continue to work on that bad hand of Killer Kurt, and obviously the Cuban will take the shortcut and take the advantage to get on top here. Now the Cuban delivers the chokehold to Killer Kurt into the corner. Cuban Commando delivering the closed fist right to the chin of Killer Kurt. Fans, this is your main event here on NCW Rampage. Kurt with a nice reversal and a nice power slam on the Cuban Commando. Hooks the leg. He's got 1 and 2, and a kick by the Cuban Commando. And again, look, the Cuban goes to the outside, trying to buy some time here and get some momentum. He runs right into the cameraman and falls down. Well, he's all messed up right now. Checking the hand, nothing there. Looking in the pockets, nothing there. Gilbert Franklin can find nothing, but look again, the Cuban Commando hiding something there behind his back, and again delivers a shot right to the throat of Killer Kurt. And again, boy, I tell you what, the Cuban Commando will do anything to gain the upper hand, especially over Killer Kurt here. Boy, oh boy. Cuban Commando up now, delivering the shot to the side of the head of Killer Kurt, now shooting him. A backdrop, Killer Kurt going for the sunset flip. The Cuban trying to get to the ropes. Killer Kurt pulls him down. He's got 1, 2, and that's it as the Cuban Commando kicks out. Both men back up to a vertical base. There's a clothesline by the Cuban Commando. Kurt staggering on the ropes. Right hand to the side of the head, and once again by the Cuban Commando. Cuban off the far side, and a high backdrop over the top rope by Killer Kurt. The Cuban Commando hits hard on the concrete floor on the outside. The Cuban backing in now. Looks like he's reaching down. He's got something in his right hand again and delivers a shot to the throat of Killer Kurt. The Cuban Commando rolling in. He hooks the leg of Killer Kurt. 1, 2, 3. That's it. The Cuban Commando using the international object there on Killer Kurt, and the Cuban Commando will get the win over Killer Kurt here in your main event on NCW Rampage. Fans, we're out of time this week. We'll see you next week right here on NCW Rampage.
So I'm here enjoying life with my wife, April, my son Quentin, and we end up moving out of a mobile home trailer into a 5-bedroom house. And I would still be, of course, driving taxi and watching these home videos with my son and my Quentin and my wife April. It just brings back a lot of memories, especially when I was younger and a kid, because these home videos, as we're watching now, brings back memories from my Aunt Esther and my Uncle Cliff's 8mm home movie films when my sister Cindy and I were kids, and of course along with our mom as well. And here we are now making home movies of our own kids with Quentin, as you see here, Quentin and my niece Samantha, and just enjoying life. And while I'm doing this, I'm working in wrestling for NCW, Nationwide Championship Wrestling, Rampage, and I'll be getting ready to do another program in NCW Rampage. Other than wrestling Killer Kurt, I'll be starting to wrestle Joey Bravo as well. But they wasn't paying me a whole lot. They were only paying me like $75 for a show, which normally I would be paid $125 in Kentucky. Now I'm down to $75. So you can see everything's starting to change in the independent scene. When they, in the early on of the independent wrestling scene, they were hungry and starving for talents. And now the pay's gone down. And that's primarily because the sponsorship wasn't there.
Welcome to NCW Rampage. We'll start off with action already in the ring. This is a Coward Waves the Flag match to start off Rampage. It's Killer Kurt and the Cuban Commando. Killer Kurt in his corner, the Wild Child, Andy Douglas. He'll be standing by with Old Glory, Stars and Stripes. And in the corner of the Cuban Commando, Joey Bravo. He is holding the Cuban flag. If one member waves the flag, then that will be it. If Joey Bravo waves the Cuban flag, then the Cuban Commando will lose. If Andy Douglas waves the American flag, then Killer Kurt will be declared the loser in the matchup, and the victor will be the Cuban Commando. That's the only way to win this match, and Killer Kurt chasing after the Cuban Commando, who spills to the outside. We saw 3 weeks ago, fans, a tag team match with Killer Kurt and Andy Douglas taking on the Cuban Commando and Joey Bravo. Every time Killer Kurt entered the ring, the Cuban Commando ran for cover. He tagged in his partner Joey Bravo, or he just ran toward the locker room. The match ended when the Cuban just left. He left the ring and left Joey Bravo in there by himself against Killer Kurt and Andy Douglas. The Cuban trying to escape once again. Killer Kurt trying to keep the Cuban in the ring. Referee Gilbert Franklin trying to break the hold there as the Cuban was in the ropes, and look, the Cuban Commando was heading back toward the locker room again. I said it a few weeks ago. I'll say it again. The Cuban Commando is flat out afraid to get in the ring with Killer Kurt. It was a cowardly act that he did when he put Killer Kurt through the table several months ago when Killer Kurt was sworn as an American citizen. It was even more cowardly and more disgusting when he threw the fireball in the face of Killer Kurt. And now it's the opportunity here for Killer Kurt to get his hands back on the Cuban Commando, but the Cuban Commando wants no part of it. Again, this is a Coward Waves the Flag match, your opening match on Rampage. Killer Kurt becoming frustrated right now. He wants the Cuban back in the ring, and finally the Cuban steps through the ropes. Kurt now putting his hands behind his back, saying, "Come on, Cuban, I'll get on one knee. Come after me." Cuban circling in. Kurt back up and grabs the Cuban with a side headlock. Solid fist right to the top of the head of the Cuban Commando. Relentless fist by Killer Kurt. Irish whip into the ropes. Big clothesline, and down goes the Cuban Commando. Killer Kurt again with a solid right hand to the top of the head. Gilbert Franklin trying to break this up. The count was on, and the Cuban Commando goes to the ropes trying to find some safe shelter. He's not finding it. Here's a high backdrop from Killer Kurt. Down goes the Cuban Commando. Joey Bravo is up on the rope. Joey Bravo is waving the flag. Joey Bravo has waved the Cuban flag. Killer Kurt's going to get the win tonight. What's this all about? Commando says, no, what happened? Referee Gilbert Franklin says Joey Bravo waved the flag. The Cuban is surprised. I'm just shocked. The fans here are surprised as well. Joey Bravo waved the Cuban flag. The Cuban loses the match because his own partner waved the flag. And now the two are having words. I think the frustration from Joey Bravo set in. And now look at Joey Bravo delivering the right hands to the side of the head of the Cuban Commando. Bravo throws the Cuban into the opposite rope. Big clothesline. Joey Bravo has turned on his partner and continues the beating on the Cuban. Cuban now backs into the corner, and we've got, I guess, an impromptu match here between these two. Cuban Commando, Irish whip into the corner of Joey Bravo. Bravo staggered. Here comes the Cuban. Big smash right to the sternum. And the Cuban Commando now has the Cuban flag and just levels Joey Bravo right in the back. And again, another shot. Continues the beating on the back of Joey Bravo. And here comes Killer Kurt from the back. Andy Douglas coming out with the chairs. And the Cuban Commando will exit. Joey Bravo waved the Cuban flag. The Cuban Commando gets the loss here tonight. Killer Kurt picks up the win in the Coward Waves the Flag match in the opening bout here on NCW Rampage. Wow, shocking development out of that one. Joey Bravo is still down in the ring. The Cuban Commando is leaving, has a few words for the fans ringside here in Moorhead. Killer Kurt gets the win here in the opening bout on NCW Rampage. Fans, again, Scotty Ace arrested several weeks ago, still trying to find out who turned him in to the authorities. Got another camera in the back. We'll go to the back right now with Sweet Scotty Ace to see if he can find out who turned him into the authorities and who sent him to prison.
I mean, life was seeming pretty good. You know, I get to spend time with my friends and my son and with my wife, April. And here I'm just enjoying life with my family and wrestling. Plus, I'm driving taxi. And we're doing pretty good. I mean, we still have bills to pay, but now I'm in a new program with Joey Bravo.
Fans, our first match in the ring here on NCW Rampage. The Cuban Commando and Joey Bravo. Of course, these two guys have had some harsh times, some tough times over the past few weeks. Joey Bravo was the one who waved the Cuban flag in the Coward Waves the Flag match, causing the Cuban Commando to lose to Killer Kurt. And great, we're joined ringside by Sweet Scotty Ace. What a treat.
It's about time you shut that mouth and let me carry the action. Look at a big scoop slam by Joey Bravo. I want to know what his deal is. Cuban Commando brought him to the top, taught him everything he knows, and now Joey Bravo turns his back. Cost him a big match a couple of weeks ago. What's the deal with that?
The Cuban, waved the Cuban flag in the Coward Waves the Flag match, and Cuban diving off of the second rope. He's got a pinfall attempt. He's got two, and that's it. As Joey Bravo kicks out of that. Well, what brings you ringside?
Well, these 2 feet and these $500 pair of boots is what brought me ringside.
Thanks.
What'd you ask for?
Much. I don't know what interest do you have in this match.
They told me in the back that you couldn't be as dumb as you look, but you proved them wrong once again.
Anyway, back in the ring, Joey Bravo and the Cuban Commando. The fans here in Ironton, Ohio, getting behind Joey Bravo with the USA chants.
You know, if Joey Bravo laid sideways on the mat, he'd look like a referee. A short one, but, you know, that's what most of ours are anyway.
All right. Cuban Commando with the upper hand on Joey Bravo here. Now going with the choke, and referee quickly in to begin the 5 count.
The actual term for that is a marshal. When you put some fingers around somebody's neck, instead of choking, that's a marshal.
It's a marshal.
At Marshall University, they choke just like everybody else, so that, you know, a big choke right there.
Okay. Comments from Sweet Scotty Ace here ringside on NCW Rampage.
You want me to carry this some more? I mean, you're choked up. You don't know what you're talking about. Tell you what, just turn his mic down. Let a professional handle this. Cuban Commando whips him across the ropes. Joey Bravo catches him with a sunset flip. The Cuban looking for the ropes. Like trying to find a bar of soap. He can't find it. 1, 2, 3. No.
Oh, there's just 2.
I was doing a good
yeah,
job.
I know. You're trying to carry it. I see.
Yes, that's called a clothesline there.
Yes, I know that.
That's called a boot to the eye.
All right, yes.
Yes.
Cuban Commando.
And that's called beans for dinner. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Cuban Commando now with a couple of handfuls of eyes there on Joey Bravo from New York City. These two guys, again, have developed quite a feud here in the last few weeks in Nationwide Championship Wrestling. Cuban's still bitter about that Coward Waves the Flag match.
Bitter?
Bitter. Angry. Upset. Rear chin lock now on Joey Bravo. Bravo trying to fight back. The fans, again, trying to keep with the USA chant.
You know, there's nothing wrong with the USA chant. I'm proud to be an American myself, but the people here in Ironton, they actually had to give them cue cards on how to spell that.
Why do you say something like that about the fine people in Ironton, Ohio?
Do you know why it's so crowded here on a Saturday night in Ironton, Ohio? Because there's nothing else to do. I mean, most of them are drunk already. Luckily, we don't serve alcohol here.
All right. Cuban Commando now with a scoop slam on Joey Bravo. And Bravo trying to catch his breath there. So that took a lot out of him there. Slam on the small of the back. Cuban Commando with the stomps and continues with those solid boots.
He's put more stamps on him than the post office. You like that?
No,
I just made that up.
Yeah, I can tell. There's a shot at the opposite side clothesline from the Cuban Commando, and Bravo down once again. Cuban now rolls him over, goes for the cover. He's got 1, 2, and Bravo just barely kicks out of
I thought that was a 3 count.
Close to a 3, but Bravo somehow got that shoulder up. Here comes the Cuban, lining him up for another scoop slam, and Joey Bravo goes down. The Cuban going to the outside. Here he goes, climbing to the top rope. What's the Cuban have in store here?
It's the bathtub. That's what he calls it, the bathtub.
And comes off with a big elbow drop,
yes,
and Bravo is down. That could be it. There's 1, 2, 3. That's it.
I thought he had him for 3.
That's what I thought. Apparently he just counted 2. There's a shot into the opposite side, reversed by Joey Bravo. Bravo with the clothesline on the Cuban Commando. And now goes for a cover of his own. Just gets 1. Sloppy cover there by Joey Bravo. Maybe still trying to get his marbles about him, if you will. And the Cuban looks like he's reached down into his boot. He's reached down into his boot and drops that foreign object right in the throat of Joey Bravo. That could do it. Look, hooks the leg. He's got 1, 2, 3. That's it. Cuban Commando gets the win.
Good night, Irene.
Over Joey Bravo. Thank you, Sweet Scotty Ace, ringside. The Cuban Commando is your winner here in the opening bouts on NCW Rampage. Fans, we'll be back after this timeout with more on NCW Rampage.
With the pay being difficult going to Kentucky for $75, I was getting paid the same at APW, so I just came back to APW, Appalachia Pro Wrestling. Next time on the Cuban Assassin Podcast, I'll be talking about going back to APW, Appalachia Pro Wrestling, and the beginning of the West Virginia Wrestling Wars. The Cuban Assassin Podcast is produced, written, edited, and directed by me, Richie Acevedo, at Mountain Man Productions. Special thanks goes to Ben Hilton for the opening and closing demographics of today's program. Special thanks also goes to Scotty Ace and the NCW for the video footage used on today's program. Special thanks goes to April Acevedo, my ex-wife, and to my late mother, Yvonne Dempsey, for the photographs and the home video footage used on today's program. You can reach me at mountainmanproductions@outlook.com. That's capital M for Mountain, capital M for Man, and capital P for Productions at outlook.com. Or you can simply leave a comment. If you like the Cuban Assassin Podcast, please like and share. I really would appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed today's program of the Cuban Assassin Podcast, and I look forward to see you next time right here on the Cuban Assassin Podcast.